Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com, and today I'm going to be taking your questions on buying tools, boost leaks, and my thoughts on ASE certifications. This is episode 142 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. Alright, so to get a question on a show like this, email me, Charles, at HumbleMechanic.com, and be sure to put question for Charles in the subject. Also, thank you guys so much for asking the question, mashing the enter button a couple times, then giving me all the details. That really does help me do a better job, faster, answering your questions. Also, if you don't see your question answered on a show like this, be sure to check the quick videos playlist on YouTube where I answer a bunch more questions, just one question at a time, right from my iPhone. So be sure to check that out. All right, and before we get into the show, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals in a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts, timing belt kits, suspension components, even fluids. In fact, they make the factory DSG fluid for Volkswagen and Audi. So check them out at crpautomotive.com. All right, let's get into the questions. First one up, I got a question about my brother's Audi A3, the first gen. It has a 1.8 turbo engine. On high RPM, it makes a weird hissing noise, sounds like a boost leak. We read the codes, it says no code stored. Could this be a ripped or loose hose? Maybe a defective diverter valve, and is this a common issue? That engine, didn't really have a diverter valve failure that failed like that. On the older gen, when the diverter valve failed, usually the diaphragm ripped, just like the newer stuff, but you'd get a really weird noise when you let off the throttle. Honestly, it's a lot like what a blow-off valve sounds like, just fluttered a little differently, and since Volkswagen doesn't use blow-off valves, they use diverter valves, it was a pretty uncommon noise. You also got a fault for that generally. What you might be experiencing is actually a boost leak. It could just be bleeding off boost at high RPM, under heavy load. You might not get a code for that. Maybe it's just a tiny bit of boost. Those engines had a lot of check valves, a lot of vacuum lines, a lot of PCV hosing, so you're gonna wanna do a really thorough inspection. Look for places where maybe oil is saturated around hoses. That can be a sign of a small boost leak as well. You can check the diverter valve if you want. If you're concerned about that, take it off and try and blow air through it. You might get a small hiss. The problem with things like this is it only happens under load, so it's not like you can have the car parked in the bay or out just outside the garage or in the garage with the door open and hear it and experience what's going on. This is only under boost. You can build a boost leak checker and pressurize the entire intake system and see if you can duplicate it that way. This were at the shop and I drove it and I duplicated it after a really incredibly thorough visual inspection, that's probably what I would do. I'd probably hook the boost leak checker up to it, pressurize it. If you have a way to introduce smoke to the system, that's another really good way to do it. The smoke will come out with the air and maybe point to a place where you might have a boost leak. But since it only happens under RPM, just checking it while the car's idling, probably not going to help you out very much. So I would go that route. Don't always bank on a car having codes when there's a problem, especially if it's only noise related. It very well might not be. If you have VAGCOM, you can jump into measuring value block 32. You can monitor what your fuel trim is. That might tell you whether you're losing boost or not. You can also go in and look at boost, and off the top of my head on that car, I forget what the measured value block is for boost, so if you know it and you're watching, post down in the comment section what value block it is, and do that and see if maybe you're not reaching maximum boost because it's bleeding off. So good question, man. Good luck to you. Thorough visual inspection, pressurize the intake system. I think those are going to be your two best bets. All right, next one comes from Ricky. Hey, Charles, Ricky from New York. I'm not sure if you covered this topic already. I'm a 6-year Nissan technician, and I've worked for BMW for a little while. I've noticed that BMW doesn't seem to care about technicians having ASE certs, and Nissan does. I don't think having them makes you a better technician. I believe going to the training center and all of the online courses does that. I'll add as well as experience to that. My father's friend is a master VW tech, and I don't think he has any. I've taken some practice tests, and it seems as if most of the engine questions are geared towards old American automobile engines. How do you feel about ASEs, and do you think they are necessary? All right, Ricky, this is an awesome question, and a topic that I don't talk about much now, but I've actually talked about quite a bit in the past. I know there's a couple of other shows that I've done about ASEs, or maybe they were blog posts. I'll have to go back and see whether they were videos or blog posts. I'm not really sure. I'll link them up in the video notes for you. You can either watch them or read them. But Basically, ASE it's a certification, right? For those of you that don't know, ASE is a way for technicians to achieve a certification in, I think it's 8 different areas of automotive. So engine, transmission, automatic transmission, drivetrain, electrical, performance. I don't remember them all. Here's the thing, I have exactly 0. At one point, I think I had 4. I passed them while I was in tech school. Part of that was because at the time I didn't know where I would end up, so I wanted to see, make sure I had these as part of my resume, basically. Now being in the industry for so long, there's value in this, right? I don't want to say there's no value in ASEs, don't waste your time, it's stupid. I don't agree with that. I think it looks good to customers. It shows that you care about what you're doing. You care enough to give extra effort, right, on your own time to achieve this level of certification. And it looks great on a resume, which is one of the main reasons why I did it early on. This looks really good. Just like to a customer, it looks good to an employer. Now, after having said all that, I, like I said, don't have any. Volkswagen doesn't put pressure on their technicians all the way up until you get to where you're going to be a master tech. Then you can do 2 things. You can take Volkswagen's master tests, 5 of them, and then when you pass those, you become a master tech after having met all the other criteria. Or you can have the 8 ASE certifications, basically be a master ASE tech. Both of them equate to the same thing, the written portion of your master tech certification. Now, it also depends dealer to dealer, right? My dealer doesn't care. If you want to get them, cool, they'll reimburse you for them if you pass the test, but it's not something that they put pressure on because I kind of agree with you, these tests have to be universal. They have to apply to a Chevrolet, a Volkswagen, a BMW, a Kia, a Hyundai, a Honda, all of it. So the questions tend to be generic, I want to say, in what they ask. It's not specific to the brand. So when I look at it, do I care that a Volkswagen technician has ASE certifications, or would I rather them have Volkswagen certifications? Well, I would rather them have Volkswagen certifications. If you're working at a Volkswagen dealership, I don't want to say I don't care how well you can fix a Chevrolet, but it's more important to me on how you can fix a Volkswagen. So I tend to lean on the side of ASEs aren't really necessary. I think it's a great thing to do. I think if you're in the aftermarket, it probably holds more weight than at the dealership because that is your certification, where at the dealership, mine is brand certification. So the way I've always looked at it is they are not meaningless. They have value. It's a good thing to do. If you are a technician and you want to set yourself apart, this is another way to do that by getting all of your ASEs. But am I going to hate on a technician for not having any ASEs? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think it's really up to you. It's up to your employer. If your employer says, hey, you're going to get a $3 an hour raise if you get all your ASEs, you get your butt to that testing center and make that $3 extra an hour. Otherwise, you're flushing money down the toilet. Don't do that. That's stupid. But I also don't think that it's like the end-all be-all. Just like being a master Volkswagen technician, a master certification does not a good technician make necessarily. Almost all, I would say 95% of the master Volkswagen techs are incredibly good technicians. There's gonna be a 5% or so that just kind of suck. And then, the flip side, there's gonna be a ton of really great technicians that have no certification whatsoever because it's just not something that's important to them. So great question, man. If you're not sure, get a couple, see what happens. If you end up at a brand that doesn't care, just one less thing to do, I suppose. All right, I got time for one more, and this one comes from Jordan. Should you test drive all the cars that you work on, and how much should you spend in tools as a first-year apprentice? Hey, Charles, love the show. Keep it up. I've been an apprentice at my local VW dealership for the past 8 months and have only recently passed a driving test. Due to this, I was never able to test drive any of the cars I'd worked on. The service manager was aware of this and he was cool. Now that I have passed my test, should I test drive every car I work on, such as a 10K or a 20K? Also, I was wondering how much should I spend on tools in my first year? I have a basic ratchet set, drill, and a few other hand tools. I've spent about 500 pounds. Is this too much or too little? Jordan, great couple of questions. Let's talk about the test drive one first. You should test drive every car that you've worked on. There's always potential for something to get screwed up. Let's say you get distracted and walk away and you leave a wheel loose. I would much rather you find that on a test drive and me have to send a tow truck to get you than me have to send a tow truck to get a customer. I don't want it to happen, period, but I'd much rather it happen to you than a customer, and hopefully you would want that as well. Test drive the car. You're going to look for tire noise. Let's say you rotate the tires on that 10K. The car didn't make any noise when the customer brought it in. You rotate the tires, now it's got tire noise. Instead of just giving that car back to the customer, you can at least tell them, hey, look, your back tires must have had a little bit of issue. We rotated your tires. Now you can actually get a noise in the front. It's not terrible, or it's horrible. We need to do something about it. You can have that conversation before you give the car back and the customer calls you complaining about it. And these little steps, these little mitigating steps really help you from dealing with a bad time when a customer brings the car back because they're mad. Why didn't you notice the noise after it? I didn't notice this before I brought it in. You guys must have done something to my car. You know, my fellow technicians, you know, call it the ever since you syndrome. Ever since you worked on my car, ever since you did this, I've had these other issues. So yeah, test drive all of your cars. It doesn't have to be a 50-mile drive. You know, usually 3 or 4 miles is plenty. Again, brake noise, brake vibration, tire noise, maybe the tire pressure light comes on because you forgot to reset it, comes on for you rather than the customer. So highly recommend test driving every car you've ever worked on. The bigger the job you do, usually the more miles you want to put on it. If you do a timing belt or service the cooling system, you want to make sure you drive it long enough to get the car all the way up to temp and make sure you don't have any air pockets in it. So there's tools to help you with that as well. But good test drives, good quality control test drives, even pre-working on the car, you know, before you start the service, is not a terrible idea to run the car around the block just to check all these little things so you can, again, let the customer know before the customer brings it to your attention, because if you find it, you guys can work through it. If they find it, it's almost always going to be a finger pointing right at you. So we don't want that. Yeah, definitely test drive the cars. Now, as far as buying tools as an apprentice, this really depends. I don't think most apprentices should go and crack $5,000 on new tools. I think that's way too much the first year because look, you're an apprentice, right? You don't know that this is going to be your career path. You don't know that in a year you're going to be working on tools. I hate to think that someone would spend $5,000 on, you know, whatever tools, whatever brand tools, and only last a year in the automotive industry. Now, the good thing is these tools will come with you and last you forever, most likely. So it's not an awful investment. It's just that $5,000 could do so much more for your life if you decide you don't want to be in the industry anymore than a toolbox full of tools. And while tools hold their value pretty well, they're never going to be worth what you pay for them when you buy them new. Which brings me to my next point. Buy used tools. There's nothing wrong with it. Buy them on Craigslist. Buy them at a pawn shop, I guess. You know, some of that stuff makes me a little uncomfortable. I'd hate to think that I bought tools that were stolen from somebody else. So be very careful with that. But don't hesitate to buy used tools. Used tool boxes, fantastic idea. Great way to go. Nothing wrong with buying used toolboxes. You can also look at like pre-packaged boxes, sort of like the Sonic toolbox that I've walked you guys through, where it's got everything laid out, it's all thought out, it's all in foam, which is super cool. So you can go that route as well. You know, it really all depends on your dealership. Do you have a journeyman or a mentor that lets you work out of their toolbox? If that's the case, I definitely wouldn't just splurge, right, on a bunch of tools. I would have a conversation with them and tell them, look, I'm going to be buying my own tools. I'm not going to be in a rush as long as you're cool with me using your stuff. I want to make sure that I get the best quality stuff that I can afford and the things that I'm going to need, not just the things that are cool. There's no reason to buy a $5,000 whatever when a $1,000 whatever will do the job just fine in your situation. So this is a highly personal question. I think my first year, I spent a lot of money on tools. I think I probably spent maybe $4,000 on tools, but I really didn't have anything, and I didn't have anyone's toolbox to work out of. So if you have someone's box you can work out of, you're a lot better off. I would buy tools slowly. Just remember, if you're borrowing somebody's tools, please respect their tools. You know, put them back where you got them, clean them, ask, make sure it's cool with them. Don't just take advantage of it in an effort to not have to buy your own tools. You want to buy your own tools. That's the ultimate goal, right? Have your own stuff. Just don't like go on the Snap-on truck and rack up a $6,000 bill just so you can have a bunch of Snap-on tools. So buy smart, buy slow, don't hesitate to buy cheap tools. That's fine too. You know, over here in the US, Don't hesitate to go to Sears and buy Craftsman tools. Don't super hesitate, but also don't just go all in on Harbor Freight tools as well. A lot of their stuff is just fine. Find the brands that you like, find the brands that get the job done. You know, I started off with almost all Craftsman tools, and then as I started upgrading when I needed to, not when I wanted to, when I needed to, all that Craftsman stuff started coming home, so I had tools at the shop and tools at home, and that's another benefit of buying less expensive tools right away. So Jordan, I hope that helps you out. I hope that gives you some ideas and pointers on buying tools. I'll also link another video that I shot with Brian's Mobile One where he talks about buying tools as well and get his advice on that. So great question, man, and good luck to you. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, post it in the comments section below. Hey, if you like the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. You can also subscribe right here on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, and of course, on YouTube, like I just said. I don't know why I say it that way, it's weird. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.